So we are here again with Zoom Seekers. Thank you all for joining us. We thought tonight we'd give things sort of a different spin than we normally do, or a different perspective than you might normally get. And a lot of times when you guys are dealing with, as we were just mentioning, a retailer or something like that, you see the diving industry from a different perspective. And so I thought what we try to do is give you some idea of what it's like from a manufacturer's perspective. And Excess Scuba is one of the larger, more active manufacturers based in if I'm recalling right, Mark, in Santa Ana here in Southern California. Started in, if my memory of my notes are correct, 2002 as a smaller company, and they've grown over the years. They now are the largest supplier of tanks and weights to various aspects of the diving community, and they're going to give you an idea of sort of what it's like to deal with stores, to deal with you guys again from a manufacturer's perspective. So with that being said, and they have their very clever Zoom backgrounds up, so you'll know who they work for. I will turn it over to Mark Gibello and Vernon Brock here on Zoom Seekers. So please give them all a Zoom Seekers round of applause.
Oh,
see everyone. We discussed all the beauty and everything. So have at it, guys.
Okay, well, I'll begin. Vernon and I are going to split this up a little bit, and then we'll kind of open it up for some Q&A with you guys at the end. As you know, Ken said, my name is Mark Gibello. I am one of the founders of Excess Scuba from 2002, when about almost 20 years ago this summer. And Ken asked me to kind of just share some insights as to what's it like being on this side of the industry from this constituency. My background is, I was once a part of Sports Chalet, for those of you that remember the old Sports Chalets, and down in San Diego primarily, and from there went on to be a sales rep in the scuba industry for Akona in Sherwood here in the Western US, and then left that company with two of the folks to start Excess Scuba 20 years ago. In fact, I can go back far enough with Ken to remember when Ken had a dive store, and I used to call on him and Bill and try to sell him my goodies out of the bag. So
absolutely true.
It's true, and so I've been a part of the Southern California diving community since the mid 80s. I was a bit of a scuba nerd when I was a kid and couldn't get enough of scuba. There was no internet, so you had to read magazines and books and go to dive stores and hang around dive people to learn things and find out things. And so this is what I know. This has been my whole life, and it's been interesting of a ride to now be a part of Excess and what we've been able to kind of do with the team of people that we have. And we're excited. I mean, we actually, we have a lot of fun most of the time. I will admit the last 2 years have been less fun. There's not a lot of dive travel and more fixing problems and solving solutions that are going on out there. But we thought we'd just give a little talk tonight and just kind of give you guys an overview and have you maybe understand a little bit more about us, and kind of what our thoughts are and what we see for the future here with diving. So with that, I'm going to just jump in. You'll see less of me or more of me, depending on how you set up your Zoom, but I'm going to bring up a little screen here, and then we'll kind of go from there. Let's see.
I'll interject for a sec. Remind you guys, while he's bringing up his screen, or when he brings it up, there you go. If you see the two white lines that are to the right on the middle right of the picture, you can grab those and you can either drag left or right to make the share screen bigger or smaller as you see fit.
And I'll give you guys just a second for any adjustments that you might be making. So Excess Scuba, and we'll talk a little bit about Excess Scuba and Sea Pearls tonight. Vernon will speak more to Sea Pearls here in a minute, but we have several brands that fall under the family. And I'm not going to spend tonight talking about all those different brands, but really Sea Pearls, so that is in Minnesota, and Excess Scuba is here in California. And Vernon and I are coming to you here from Southern California. So, all right, let's see. Here we go. All right, a little history. As I mentioned, it was founded in 2002. by three guys. We were, a big part of what was going on with Sherwood. It was time for a change for us. We had an idea. We thought it was a good idea. We weren't sure it was a good idea, but we quit our jobs one day and decided to start a scuba company. We did have some knowledge and some experience about products and dealers and, the basics. So it wasn't like we went into it without that knowledge, but we literally started with just a weight belt. I was a rep for a company called Excess Baggage. It was a guy and his wife. They were both remarried. They had 8 kids. They made gear bags and weight belts, and they thought it was funny because they had so many kids to call it Excess Baggage. We started with that. We bought his little company from him and changed the name to Excess Scuba. So we are not extra small. We are not excessive. We just simply bought a company called Excess Baggage and thought we would just change it to Excess Scuba because we needed to get going. I mean, this all happened back in 2002 very fast. Right away, we became a distributor, one of the main distributor for Luxfer. They were here based in Riverside, California. And that was a huge moment for us because having cylinders really opened us up for people finding us rather than us finding them to begin a business relationship. As you can imagine, just about every dive store and internationally, the resorts and the boats and the places you guys travel to, they all need cylinders. So that really opened up a lot of opportunities for us. Then things started to kind of shake open a little bit more when in 2004, IDI, which is a brand of gear, some of you may know that brand, you may not. Anyways, they had been around for several decades. They had gone belly up, and we went into a bank auction and bought all the assets there. That kind of opens us up into some new products with regulators and BCs, also some rubber fins, the turtle fins specifically. A year later, we were hungry for steel cylinders. We are firm believers in steel cylinders. At the time, a company called Press Steel was going out of the industry. They were shutting down. They had successfully introduced the high pressure steel cylinders. I would imagine several of you dive with these cylinders. And so we partnered up with Worthington Steel to build those cylinders in 2005. A couple of years later, we ended up purchasing a little company back east that made the best twin bands for out of stainless steel for diving with twin cylinders. That was really a key part of what we wanted to do with the steel cylinders and other twin applications moving into tech diving. And then a big thing happened in 2007, which was we acquired Sea Pearls as an entity. And so rather than blend it into Xteba, we kept it as a standalone business. And Vernon will speak some more about that here in a little bit. We took on thermal valves because the scuba cylinders aren't really that great if you don't have a valve in them, as you can imagine. So thermo being made in Japan, they were getting out of the scuba business. And so we acquired that. And then a few years ago, we added the Sea Dive and Ocean Ways mask brands, which really expanded some things for us. If you guys are aware of coated masks with the coated technology, Sea Dive was really the predecessor, the early company that developed that technology. In fact, the coatings that we do on our masks are proprietary, and it's one of the reasons they're some of the best-selling coated masks in the industry. So that was something that a gentleman by the name of Noel Brown had done. I mentioned his name because the guy literally worked on developing masks and his business until he was in his early 90s. So for any of you that are retired or thinking about retiring, this guy at 92, we tried to buy his business and he wasn't ready. We had to wait one more year and then he was ready. So sadly, Noel passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a really great guy to get to know. So that's a little bit about our history, who we are. Excess Scuba, I mean, you can see Vernon's smiling face on there. I have a feeling there's a couple of other Excess Scuba teammates here on this group tonight, but we're a group of people committed to making great products for the scuba diving community. That's what we like to do. I mean, that's what we're really all about. We're just divers who love diving, and we love brainstorming new ideas, with products that make diving more fun, more enjoyable, and just kind of make little things easier. And, that's sometimes what we're just sitting around doing. When we go diving, we're on boats, we're on a dive trip, we're at the beach, we're watching other divers. What are they doing? What are they challenged by? What if we're listening to a conversation of a couple of divers talking, what would they wish their gear could do differently, or what would make something easier? We pick up on that and those types of details. How could we solve that problem? And so many of the products in our line are products that are a solution to a problem. So, for example, we did something called a quick launch. There's a little picture here, but the quick launch, well, we were watching people when they were using SMBs on dives, pulling out the SMB and unfurling that, and then clicking the spool to it and hooking that up and then letting it go. People were having some challenges where it just wasn't very graceful. So we came up with an idea where the spool was built into a little pocket, and all you got to do is open the little pocket and let it go, put a little air in and let it go. Works great. It has become it's by far and away our best selling SMB we've ever designed. And honestly, our biggest challenge in the last year and a half is keeping them in stock. It really has. It's amazing how well they do, because they work. So, we find our best successes when we can create a product that's actually a solution to a problem. One of the things we see around us in not just diving, but other businesses is people creating, solutions, but there's no problem. Those products don't tend to do very well or last very long. We want to do the things that our customers see on our products and appreciate the little details that make them better. It's what we consider to be like our diving experience touch. The fact that people can notice the things that we're doing on our products. Obviously, were designed by people who dive. I see other products out there, and I can tell, unfortunately, when there's elements or things that whoever did this doesn't actually use this product, because they would never do it this way. And this is true not just in scuba, but I see it like in other industries and sports, where you can appreciate the little details because they're having users or people who are passionate about that activity be involved in that design process. Through that, we have, as Ken mentioned at the beginning, become the largest supplier of scuba aluminum and steel cylinders, valves, manifolds, along with lead weights. There's others that do some of what we do and kind of like what we do, but there is nobody else globally that does all of what we do, nor with the level of expertise. The U.S. government, military, our thermal valves are only used by our government. They won't use anything else because of the quality, dependability, availability of parts, et cetera. It's kind of a little interesting fun fact that our valves have literally been put in the International Space Station they're not scuba diving up there, just to be clear, but there is an application where they do use scuba cylinders up there, and they use our valves. They went through a tremendous amount of testing, as you can imagine, all the way down into, Navy submarines in the deepest parts of the ocean. So we like to think of ourselves as the company who's gone to the highest highs and the lowest lows with our products, which is, I mentioned it because I think it's pretty neat. The growth, we talked about being around for 20 years. We've seen a lot of things kind of happening through that, and we've really grown to become what we think is really the most complete and full line brand of diving equipment out there. We really do just about everything except dive computers. And I always put the maybe one day, because never say never. We really do it all. When people flip through our price list or our catalog, one of the comments I often hear is, wow, there's really everything that you could possibly need. And yeah, if you're going on a trip and you need something and you flip through our book, it's probably in there. Really, almost every store in the US has an account with us, including CPROS, because of our availability of the lead weights and the cylinders. And what's great about that is it gives us great diversification in terms of what we are experiencing with what's happening in different parts of the country. COVID was a real interesting time of that, because we were getting sort of like real-time feedback from dealers all across the US about how things were happening with lockdown and what their options were. And as things started to really open up, which I'll talk about in a minute, it was really giving us that insights as to what was happening. So it's interesting having the way things happen in scuba around the country can be quite different depending on what's trending. We are continually adding new accounts internationally. It's a big world out there and there's a lot of water. So there's a lot of places to go diving, and those places generally need dive gear, and especially they need cylinders. That's kind of what a lot of the international relationships start with, is the cylinders. And then they take a look at the line and they realize, oh, well, I might as well do a little shopping. I kind of liken it to going to Costco. If any of you guys go there for one thing, are you ever successful with that? I mean, I'm not. And that's why I think they give you that big giant cart, because they know you won't be successful. So we kind of like it when someone comes to us for cylinders and then they sort of shop and look around and they realize there's a whole lot here. One of the things about Excess Scuba is people ask us, we're very dealer focused. We have a strong passion for supporting the local stores around the country, even internationally, that we want our products sold by professional dive stores. You'll notice if you're on our website, you can't buy anything on our website. But we do have a dealer locator, so you can find places to purchase equipment. You can purchase on Amazon, but not directly by us. We only allow our products sold by professional dive retailers through the Amazon channel. We'll talk a little bit about online later. Our design philosophy, which is, we started with the simple product line, with mask snorkels, booties, gloves, gear bags, and then the cylinders. That's what kind of got us going. We really tried to be value oriented. We had to kind of decide early when we were going to do this company as to what do we want to make, which is what you saw above, but also we wanted to make good quality products at a fair price. We thought about, if I was buying the gear, what would I want? And that's what we were trying to do. We didn't want to go and be a trashy, cheap, basic, crappy line. And we also didn't want to see ourselves trying to go right after the top shelf. We actually launched Excess Scuba really shortly after Atomic launch. And we saw that that's a great niche. They started with one regular, and then they added a couple more and went after the top of the market. But we really wanted to because we were really focused on surviving. We had 3 guys who wanted to make an income and make this business work and support our families and live. So we were really, what could we do that was wide oriented with the brand and be successful. So, but we figured, we got to build relationships. This industry, and I think Ken can attest to it, is very much built on relationships. I mean, for those of you, the guys and gals that have been around the scuba industry for a while, it is all about relationships. So building a reputation on customer service was very important to us. And it was something that we put out there. I've always tried to teach our staff if there was ever an award show for service, or whatever in the industry, that's something that we would want to win, because it's a team effort. It's not just one person. In fact, our warehouse with the will calls and everything is all about that too. So we try to always have it in stock and minimal back orders. The last 2 years have really, that almost bullet shouldn't be on there, but up until it was pretty true. And we're always looking to improve upon ideas and build a better mousetrap. And that's kind of what leads to like this slide I wanted just to share with you, because, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, and maybe you can see my marker here, these bullet weights here with the clip on them were designed decades ago. And really what they were for was to put on a weight belt so that you could clip a gear bag or some other, piece of equipment to the diver, because everybody was diving weight belts at that time. And over the years, we see a lot less weight belts, but we still sell a lot of these weights. And what's happening is people are using them like with classes to attach to a student, or they're a little bit light on the dive and they're on the side of the boat. And so they grab one of these weights and clip it on their BC, and it works. They're 2-pound weights, but they dangle and they sway. And so they're not really the best way to do it. And when we started with that weight belt company, we also had a design for a single pocket weight you see here in the top left, this one, where you could add it to any 2-inch webbing, very commonly used on tank straps. So you could add some trim weights, and that's been a very successful product for us over the years. And then most recently in the last year, we've added an idea where you can take this little plate right here. It's got these little almost like diamonds on it, like grip, put it up against some webbing, and then you can pull these little strings and wrap them over any 2, 3, 4 pound weight like that. And so you can strap them to on a weight belt. You can strap them onto a harness. There's a lot of places you can attach them, but it's really a weight plate, and makes it even easier where the weights can be added real quickly to any 2-inch webbing. So it's more about taking what was an idea and just improving upon it over time. So that's something that we've been kind of trying to do as just one idea. And another idea here is talking about is market challenges, and that was something that, we wanted to speak a little bit about tonight, was just what are the challenges out there, and the most obvious that everybody always tends to focus on, initially is competition from other brands and the other manufacturer and who's doing what and what product have they added. And, it's like the Ford versus Chevy thing, or Ford and Ferrari, if you want to make it a movie. But really for us, that's not so much our biggest competition, because that's always going to be there. But what we're really trying to do as an industry, and as for the dive stores and the resorts and the boats and everything else, is it's the competition from other sports and activities. I would imagine many of you have other leisure activities and interests and things that you do, and where your discretionary income goes to participate. Now, look, if some of you are diehard scuba and that's the only thing you do and the only thing you spend on money, you're my people. But that's not necessarily everybody. So what we try to do is be aware of what's going on that might be distracting or pulling divers away from going diving. And really, in the last couple of years with COVID and people not being able to travel and only being able to do localized activities, diving became something that was very, available for a lot of people. If they could get air fills, they could go to the beach and they could go to lakes and other places to go diving. And because you're underwater and kind of on your own, you have a buddy near you, but I never heard of anybody catching COVID while diving underwater. It became very accessible and ramped up, and the diving industry exploded in the second half of 2020 because of that. Sometimes when we're talking during the day and we're working on things, we have these conversations about product innovation and, gosh, are there any good ideas left? Has everything been done? Has all the cool ideas been put out there? And sometimes there's things that are on the whiteboard, so to speak, that don't come around for several more years if the timing wasn't right. They were a little bit too early, or we weren't ready to do that at that time. But continuing to innovate is always a challenge, to find a way to do it better or a new idea. Obviously, I think it can be said that currently the economics of the U.S. and the world are a challenge. The last 2 years have been both boom for us and bust for us. It has been good times and the hardest of times. And so that has been very hard to navigate for us with what's been going on in the world today, but specifically how it affects our industry and our products. And we are finding opportunities because our competition, both from the top 2 lines up there, if they're struggling, we can benefit from that. But if we can't get our products because they're sitting off the coast of LA, and I think many people on this tonight have seen and know of all the ships out there, it's not doing us any good. And so that has been a huge challenge for us. COVID really in 2020 changed everything. 2019 in the scuba industry was really a good year. The last few years of 2017, 18, 19. In fact, there's an annual trade show called DEMA, and you may have heard of it. At that show, the buzz was generally speaking, and when talking to people, was 2019 was a good year, and people were optimistic for 2020. They kind of went into it thinking this is going to be another nice year in the business and things are moving in the right direction. and then everybody got walloped, right? We went into that lockdown right at the beginning of Q2, and things were very, very quiet. I mean, and we were, that was one of the first time in nearly 20 years that we did not know what the future of our business would be. I think that was true for a lot of people. I think that was the talk, certainly on the news and in our conversations with our friends and family. And summer started to kind of peel back across the country, and everybody figured out, well, we could go diving. And that's kind of what happened. And then Q3 and 4 were a surge. I mean, it was like a completely different world. We were all still, for the most part, locked down and not traveling, but people were diving. So that was all good until, I think the world in the modern day has never seen the brakes get hit so hard and then try to shift and put it in floor the accelerator. And the global economic system does not work well under that. That is not how things happen. And that certainly caused supply chain issues to begin in 21 and still continue to today. One of the things that did happen, which really affected Scuba, was aluminum cylinder production shifted really hard. There's only a few cylinder manufacturer locations in the US, and they tend to run at pretty full capacity anyways. But when COVID came, they were challenged by, one, losing lots of workers at any given day, any given week due to COVID sickness and having to stay away and quarantines, and especially in the pre-vaccine era. And then the world kind of needed oxygen cylinders. And so they couldn't build enough oxygen cylinders fast enough. And when that happens, that's where the money is, because the cost doesn't matter. And aluminum scuba cylinders were basically shifted to the side. So we were extremely challenged in being able to get aluminum cylinders. And really, we're still playing catch up today. I mean, I think our most recent shipment that came in, this is now early May, is either from December or January. So, I mean, it's still months behind in the lag. It seems to be getting better, but along with that has been in significantly increased pricing, because I mean, in the days when we started Excess Scuba, we used to be able to sell a cylinder to a dive store for around $100, a few $110. And today, they're pushing $200 or over $200. It's nearly doubled in the last 20 years, but specifically, it's probably gone up 25, 30% just in the last year and a half. I mean, it's really taken the increase has been fast. That's only probably been more accepted because people today are just trying to get a cylinder, and then they might grumble about the price, but the price is sort of secondary to, can we get them? And one of these days that's going to catch back to price, but it's not right now. So inflation has definitely changed what has been a very stable pricing situation in this business. With dealers know what things cost, and savvy consumers know what things cost. And people are really realizing when they go in to buy a new pair of booties or a pair of gloves, like, whoa, that's certainly more than I used to pay. And that's true. It's a factor in everything, boat prices, with fuel and everything else. The other thing that's been a thing in the last recently has been employee acquisitions. We've added some new players to our team through the last couple of years. This is an opportunity to welcome Vernon, because he came to us at the end of last year and is the newest senior member of our team and has been doing great. So I just wanted to put that out there because we're pretty excited about that. So what do we see as the future? What does Excess Scuba, see as the future? And what I mean here by being based on the past, what's been going on, the future looks pretty much the same for the near term of the scuba industry. What I'll tell you is that the dive industry is fairly stable. It doesn't change a lot. There's not a lot of, if you take out the COVID stuff over the last couple of years and what that's done, but just look at product development, the number of dive stores, the number of divers diving, when you talk to the training agencies and such, the diving industry is really quite stable, and that's probably more of a good thing than a bad thing. You're not seeing, record growth and, new participants are climbing like crazy. I think those days for the industry are behind us, but I'm always glad to see new faces, young faces out there joining the sport and getting into diving, because it's something that for a lot of us, it's passionate. We love it. And it's great to see more people doing that. For us, we still see the future as supporting the local dive store. It's such an important piece and component of the industry for us as an equipment manufacturer. Without them, our whole strategy and game plan changes, and we're not ready to ditch the dive store. For us, it's without them, your access as consumers in diving and the participants, it's very limited. They're the ones that are doing the training, all the air fills. If you have a friend that wants to learn to dive, that's where they go. If you need your equipment repaired, reg serviced, and you want to buy stuff, they're a great place for all that. The awesome part about dive stores is you can try it on and touch it and feel and see, okay, do I like this booty? Do I like this glove? You can try 10 different masks that probably haven't tried on 10 or 20 times before you. Yeah, that's true. But you can buy it right there. They will usually give you a brand new one when it comes to the mask anyways. Travel, adventure trips to the exotic locations, being a part of, the group here, I would imagine that you guys are all about travel and adventure trips, dive clubs, social connections. Diving, for a sport that you generally don't talk to each other underwater, is a very social one. Here we are tonight being social, or at least you get the opportunity to listen to me. But we connect through it. A question we get asked, as an equipment manufacturer, is, what about online equipment? Is that good? Is that bad? What do you guys think about that? What's your take on that? I really think for the most part, it's both. In online equipment in equipment sales have been around for now about 20 years. The genie's out of the bottle, so to speak. It's not going away. I mean, we all are well aware of online sales. So really, our focus on that has been to moderate that in a way that is both, proactive and helpful for both the customers and the dealers, so that it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Along that way, there's been some consolidation over the last 20 years. Early on, everybody was trying to make their own website and try and selling the gear to their customers. But in the end, there's a handful of places that people shop generally. For example, Leisure Pro acquired Scuba.com a few years ago. Scuba.com was based here in California. Leisure Pro was back east in New Jersey and New York. And, behind the scenes, there was a little bit of a war kind of going on, competition. And so now Leisure Pro has changed their name to Scuba.com. So Scuba.com is really Leisure Pro today. That just happened recently, if you didn't know. So there's some consolidation happening. Amazon and, other third-party sites. Amazon, was a novelty. I can remember people telling me about dive gear being on Amazon, and we really didn't even pay much attention to it. And so, we are now working more. In fact, it's one of our objectives and goals in 2022 here that Vernon is taking the lead on is, for the presentation of our products on Amazon. We're not selling them. We have professional retailers who do, but the photography, the marketing, the details, all that we are working to really be at the top of the game in terms of the presentation and what's being said or being shown about our products is as good as it can be for those customers that do choose to make a purchase on Amazon. What we tend to find is Amazon is not usually a place for some of the more life support things like BCs and regulators, but really when people are leaving on a trip, it's like, oh my gosh, and they don't have a local dive store that's 5 minutes away or 15 minutes away. A lot of America, it can be 40 minutes to get to the store, and it's just easier to get those 2 or 3 things on Amazon. So sometimes it works out pretty easily like that. There's been map pricing. You'll notice a lot of times the products, when you look at them online, they're the same price in the store. That's because the manufacturers control that pricing that's being presented online, so that there is not a pricing advantage to buying online like there used to be in the early days because that was destroying the value of the brands. But really, the value in the store is such that you've got that service and that support, professional people you can talk to, go in for problem solving, have a conversation, look at options, and kind of figure out what you want to do. We're really thinking hard, more and more about how to protect the oceans for the next generation of divers. And we're looking at, we're hearing the same things you guys are hearing, and it's getting harder to do that. And what does that look like? And what can our part be? And what can we support? So, we work with a lot of different nonprofits that, are either needing soft line for rebreather diving so they can go out and do exploration, or they need cylinders, or they need gear. Or the Ocean X vessel that does a lot of research, we work with them. But we're really trying to be supportive in those that are out there trying to find ways to think about the future for our oceans. We're a sponsor of beach cleanup events, the Avalon Harbor, for example. Even things like Chamber Day, which is not so much about protecting the ocean, but about protecting the divers. But we're even in the last years, 10 years ago, this wasn't even really a topic. And today you can't avoid it. And so we're constantly, every time we're doing a new product and we're looking at the packaging of our products, is how do we use less plastic in the packaging? Look, a mask is going to have plastic, and a fin is made out of, more or less a plastic. That's hard to kind of get around necessarily. But the way it's packaged, can we avoid a lot of these plastic bags and other things that are part of that? It's really challenging to avoid it completely, because when someone buys like a mouthpiece, they don't want it all dusty. They do want it to be protected. But in many cases, we have found lots of ways. The amount of plastic that we have reduced in packaging is significant. And hey, if everybody's doing that, it's going to make a difference. And so we're kind of excited to be a part of that. Lastly, I will just say, you guys know this, if you're divers and travel, touch nothing, leave the bubbles. That's all. And, practice your buoyancy control skills, because that's what's helping out when people don't drop down on reefs and things like that. So just a couple of slides here, just some hero shots, we like to call them, about some of our products, but you get an idea of wings, the coated mask, gauges, manifolds, breathable inflators, our fins, regulators and BCs that we're doing. The knife wrap that you see in that photo there was something that we intended for scuba, but it turns out a lot of America likes to wear a knife on their calf for hunting or other activities. And we sell way more outside of the scuba on Amazon than we do for scuba divers. So who knew? In the bottom left, you can kind of see a picture of a guy who's actually doing some side mount. And so he's got using the weight plates to strap to his harness to be able to disperse weight around him rather than to wear a weight belt. MeFlex hoses, some of our gear bags. In fact, in terms of a problem that we solved or another opportunity, we looked at floats. In this float, you see the picture of the spearfisher. But, we were watching instructors along the beaches of California, and everybody's got the inner tube or some version of it. And so we set out to actually make a float that can be configured for both spearfishing or game collecting, can be set up for instructors for doing classes, or can be set up for hookah diving. So you can put a tank on there and like a 25-foot hose, and for hookah diving. And it's had incredible success. It's a very good quality product. And, people really responded well to it because of its, so much universal, but the fact that it can be configured what works best for them. So yeah, we're just pretty excited about, what things have gone along the way. I think a lot of times people like to ask if we're part of the North Pole and Santa Claus, and we have a bunch of elves and we just tinker and make scuba things all day. And I wish it was that fun, but I think for a lot of it, it's also, it's work, and there's challenges, and there's things that come up that can be hard. And, even in the state of California, we're dealing with things like Prop 65 and labeling on products and making sure that that's all taken care of. And, there are the challenges that any manufacturer or product company in the state of California faces. But along with that, just in terms of, things don't always go the way you expect them to, and having to be able to pivot and be adaptable. And, that's been part of the journey over the last 20 years. And so we're excited just to keep it going. So I'm going to go ahead and take a breather and let Vernon speak to you guys here. And I'll let him go ahead now.
And everybody
Awesome.
give Mark a nice round of silent applause. There you go.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Vernon. Now you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ken. Thanks for the invite tonight. I was looking forward to this. So hopefully everybody enjoys the slides that I've got to run through here. So what I thought I would do is, obviously I was going to speak about our Sea Pearls business. And what I thought would be fun would be to give some insights just on the start of the company, some of the inspiration that the founder set out to solve, the problems that he set out to solve, and give everybody kind of a sneak peek and a tour of how our lead weights are made. So there'll be a bunch of a few slides here in the beginning that we'll run through with just some of the background on the company, and then we'll get into some pictures and images and some videos here. So I'm going to go ahead and share screens. All right. So Mark, can you confirm my
Yeah, you're looking good.
Yeah, you're good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So Sea Pearls. So I titled this, obviously, How Lead Weights Are Made. But backing up here before we get into that, my screen's lagging. There we go. A little bit about Sea Pearls. Sea Pearls was founded a little over 30 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Lee Salisky. Lee came from a die casting background. He had a lot of experience in metal die casting, as well as was a technical diver. So the company today is located in Brooklyn Park, near where Lee had originally set up the business. And its beginnings were focused on making a better lead weight. And you might scratch your head a little bit on that and say, how can you make a better lead weight? So I'll try to shed some light on that. So anyway, in 2002, Sea Pearls partnered with Excess Scuba, where Sea Pearls became a distributor of cylinders for Excess Scuba. And that really complemented the business. Sea Pearls, all they did was make lead and ship lead. So here's something else that's really heavy, and that worked very, very well with the business. And chances were, if a store needed lead, they probably needed cylinders as well. So it went well together. And then in 2007, Lee had decided to go on and do other things. And that presented the opportunity for Excess Scuba to acquire the business. And Excess Scuba has kept it in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, in Lee's old facility ever since. And some of the staff there are still some of the staff that started up right about the same time as the acquisition or just before. So kind of a nice legacy there. So what makes a better lead weight? There's really four factors here. The first is the weight accuracy. When you think back 30, 40 years ago, the industry was really supplied, the lead weights were supplied into the industry from folks that would make them in their garage. They'd get a source of lead, they'd have some lead stored up in the corner, and people would, some people would make molds and they'd hand pour it. They'd heat it up, hand pour it, and they'd make lead weights. And so what it meant, though, is that there was a lot of inaccuracies in terms of the actual weight of that hunk of lead. So if it was a 2-pound lead weight, very often it was under, maybe over. And that created problems for dive stores. Just a kind of a side note, every state has its divisions of weights and measures. We go to the gas station and we get our gas and we see those stickers all over the gas pumps. If those gas pumps aren't pumping the exact right amount of fuel, those gas stations get fined. Well, it's the same thing like dive shops. Dive shops were getting fined when the authorities would go in and they'd see a 2-pound weight and they'd put it on a scale and maybe it was 1.7 pounds. Boom, there's a fine. So it was a problem. It was an issue in diving, but also, it was the products were locally distributed. Somebody working out of the back of a warehouse or in their garage, they sold lead weights to the stores around them when they would have lead. So it wasn't a consistent supply, and it was all local. So it created challenges for dive stores there to always have lead. So Lee saw those issues, and he brought his expertise in metal die casting with molds that were designed to produce the specific weight that's obviously noted there on the lead. So that was kind of the first issue there. The second is that lead is very, as we know, malleable. Even in its solid state, it's a very soft metal. Over time, it can get bent, warped, that sort of thing, lose its its shape, its desired shape. So Lee had he had come up with a proprietary formula where he added antimony for hardness and tin for shine, and plus some other metals there that really give the characteristics of that hard, shiny lead weight that we're all familiar with today. Third, big challenge, again, reliable supply, right? We touched on that earlier. The facility located in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, right smack dab in the middle of the country. You can produce lead there, produce lead weights, ship them east, ship them west, and you can get them to any dive store in North America rather quickly. In addition to that, there is a reliable source of lead. There is a very large lead recycler that happens to be located in Minnesota, where it's primarily auto batteries get shipped to this facility. And it's very, very impressive. They have this huge machine where they load it up with batteries, and it crunches them down, extracts the lead out, and all of that waste material then gets neutralized before it goes out into the waste stream. So it's a clean facility, and it's also utilizing recycled lead. And so and they are able to supply lead to us with our specific formula that we were talking about earlier with the antimony and the tin, et cetera. So we always have a very known raw good that we're working with when we're starting the process. And lastly, as we talked about with the die casting and Lee's know-how there, he brought scaled manufacturing to the industry, and combine that with the centrally located, and we could get it out in an economical manner, again, to anywhere in the country. So really kind of 4 secrets to success there that really makes a better lead weight physically, but also so you can get it. And Lee really solved all that. So a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about die casting and show some of our machines that we have in the facility. Little background on die casting. You can see the diagram on the right there. I'll touch on that in just a moment. Die casting, it was invented in 1838. So I had I had some learning here as I did my research in prep for this presentation tonight. It was invented in 1838. The first patent for it wasn't actually granted until 1849, but really it was used for movable type for printing presses. So they would use a die casting process to create that movable type that was then used. And so it was really, when you think about die casting and its contribution, it was really a means for us to rapidly start sharing information, which is kind of impressive when you think about that. It wasn't until the 1890s where die casting was actually then adapted and started to be used in other industries, and it started to go wide and broad at that point there. So it took a long time to get there, but it's obviously used in every facet just about of metal manufacturing to this day. So just a quick note. The Sea Pearls uses a high pressure die casting process. And then we also do some hand pouring, which I'll talk a little bit about that. But when we look on the right, the die cast machine, if we just break it apart, all the way on the right, we've got what we call a pot. and that's just what you think it is, right? That's where you put your metal slag in, your ingot, and you heat it up and you melt it. And then you've got some of that molten metal in the chamber. Now there's a plunger that you see here that will then go down, and it pushes that metal and forces it through that gooseneck, or what we call the barrel. There's usually a barrel that's not shown here that kind of encases this whole area. And then that goes into our die, and then creates our finished product there. So as we go through the next slides, I'll kind of reference some of these things here and show you what it looks like on our machines and through the process. So first off, as we dig into this, the first thing that happens, obviously, we need to get our lead in. So here on the left, you've got a picture of our raw ingot as it comes to us. So this is from our local recycler there in Minnesota. We order lead in 40,000 pound increments, and we do this multiple times throughout the year. Little fun fact: each one of those ingots weighs 70 pounds. In each one of those bundles, there's 35 ingots, and each one of those is 2,400 pounds. So quite impressive when you see all of that in one image, or you see that in person too. And I give our folks credit who haul those things around, obviously most of the time with the forklift, but they're picking up those ingots one by one when they're loading them into our die cast machines. Now, when you look on the right, what you can see here is we're actually looking down into the pot of our machine. So this silver, this is actually molten lead. And if you look here where my arrow is, that's the plunger. And so in there, right below that is the chamber, and it shoots it out towards these blue flames, which is the barrel there going to the mold. So this is maintained at 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Lead melts at, I think it's like 650, 700 degrees. So we keep it just above melting temperature. The folks grab ingot throughout the day, and they refill the pot, as well as, and I'll show you some examples later, as well as some lead that if it goes through the die cast machine and comes out and it's not satisfactory, it gets dumped right back here into the pot and reused. So everything gets used here in this process. Moving on here, again, you can see the pot with the barrel, and that's traveling over here to our die, which is here on our right. So that's our die. If you look closely, you can see that that's actually got some typical lace through leads there, or lead chambers there for the die. And this is what we call, again, a high pressure die. And I've got a little video of that working here. Before each use, this is Rob here, he is lubricating the die. And so we lubricate it in between every use. It makes 4 lead bricks for each time it closes. And then it opens up, Rob extracts that lead out, and then he re-lubes up the die. And so it's actually a mixture of wax and silicone that he uses. And sometimes you may see some kind of different tones of lead on your finished lead weight. And some of that's kind of caused by that material there, as it's super hot and it's heated and kind of cooks there with the lead when it closes up. And I'll show you an example of that here in a little bit. But looking here, let's see if this video will work. This is the die. It's closed. It just got filled with lead, and it's resting now and cooling down. And it cools down what it's called a dwell time. And it's about a 30-second process for lead to cool down to the point where we can actually extract it. And you can see the extraction pins there push the lead out and make it easy for the operator to pull that out. So moving on. So once it pops out, this is what it looks like. Again, your four pieces of lead. And each piece at this stage goes through a quality control inspection process. So really, it's The lead, we look at the surface and make sure that there's no pitting. Sometimes you see little bubbles, imperfections in that finish. Those pieces get taken and put back into the pot. But also, like you can see here, the flashing on the edge where the die actually, the two ends of the die actually come together. You can see that flashing there. That gets taken off, and then obviously what we call the runner here gets taken off as well. This is all a fine science, if you will. If you can get the pressure, the time, and the temperature all optimum, you can minimize your flashing, and it just makes the process that much quicker. And the team there, our production manager, Tony, who looks over this, he spends a lot of his time dialing that in every day, because when the team comes in and they start production, it just makes them that much more efficient, and they're able to pump out that much more lead. But let's watch, this is a video here. Let's watch Rob clean this up here, as it just came out. It's still hot. You can see he's got his gloves on. And here we go. So again, removing the runner. And then it gets sent over, and from there goes into right into the box to get put onto the shelf to be shipped to a retailer who is ordered that lead. The other thing we do is, now on the left, this is lead that what we call uncoated lead. So it gets shipped to the retailers. We're all very familiar with this probably, and that's the way it goes to the consumer. On the right here, we also do a lot of vinyl dip lead. So you may be familiar with that. You probably have seen black, yellow, blue vinyl dip lead out there. From the die cast machine, that lead, instead of getting boxed up into case packs, gets crated, as you can see here. Now this, you can tell this is going to go for a vinyl dip because the lead is slightly different than the lead that you see on the left. And you can tell this is vinyl dip by a couple of means. One, there is this little hole here. This is called a hang hole. So there's actually a hanger that has wire hooks that come out of it, and the lead physically gets placed onto those hooks when it gets vinyl dipped. And you can also tell, if you look closely, the gap in the lead here, where your weight belt would go, the gap here is wider on the vinyl dip than it is on the uncoated. And although they weigh the same, that's by design, so it will accommodate the thickness of the vinyl once that's applied to the material. So anyway, that's what it looks like when it comes out, and that goes to a local vendor that is also located in Minnesota. So again, supporting another local business there. So from there, on the left, it gets put up onto the shelf, and you can see that's all cases of lead. And then on the right here, just a couple of other pictures from some of the other aspects of the business at Sea Pearls. We also stock softener lime. Now this is some softener lime that was up on the shelf now, but softener lime, is used by technical divers when they're doing rebreather diving. It's the scrubber that pulls the CO2 out of their systems. So we distribute that to dive stores across the country. And then, of course, as Mark had talked about, aluminum and steel cylinders we distribute as well. So you can see here an assortment of, these are aluminum cylinders, and these large boxes, you can't see it in there, these are the tank boots. So we also have those made at another factory near Minnesota. So anyway, kind of neat there. But we've talked about, the process of manufacturing the lead weights. There's also a lot of other things that we do in seed pearls around lead. That's not necessarily for the dive industry. And what we've got here is a few examples of specialty hand pour weights that we make. Maybe for commercial diving applications. We make lead for the medical field, so they can hold radioactive medications in little tubes. We make these lead, what I'll call like lead bricks. They're stackable, and Ford orders those. They're 25 pounds a piece. They use them in their crash tests. So they'll stack these and put those in the car to simulate the weight of an individual sitting in the seat. So we make those for Ford. And this one here is kind of unique. It's actually kind of, I think, one of the fun ones. This big plate of lead weighs 2,450 pounds. And is made for a company that, if you're at the airport and you see those vehicles pushing airplanes around, those vehicles would be way too light to be able to push those airplanes around if it didn't have plates of lead built into them. So that's what this is. So we do that. It's a hand pour. It really goes from a modified barrel. And we pour it right into this casing here. And the guys got they have to make sure that there's no bubbles and that it's smooth and all that. So it is quite a job when they got to do one. And then this gets crated around, via forklift. You can also see here, there's a piece here where they can actually suspend it and pull it up with the forklift. And then they got to shake it and hammer it and get that casing off of the lead plate there. So anyway, other things that Sea Pearls does that supports businesses outside of diving, but all derived from the inspiration and the desire within diving. So it's kind of neat there. Again, our core, here's an example of some of our products that we make. Die casting, we've talked a lot about. We also do sewing at the facility. You can see down here in the bottom left, ankle weights. We buy the mesh. Carol, shout out to you, from Peru. So we buy the shot weights that go into mesh weights. We buy that from a supplier in Peru. And that supplier supplies like, ammunition companies, if they're making shotgun ammunition, et cetera. So we buy that same product and we bring it up to Sea Pearls, where we sew it up and we make ankle weights. We also have, the soft mesh weights that you're all probably familiar with. And then, here's some of the molds that we use to make these products that you see next to them. So here's the pass-through lead, as well as those quick attach weights that Mark was talking about. These are some of the molds that we use for those. And then, of course, what we've been looking at with the lace through coated and uncoated lead. So anyway, so that's a quick tour of our Sea Pearls facility and look at our business. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, we've got obviously time here. We can open it up for questions. Anyway, eager to hear if there are any.
Yeah, Mark, Vernon, go ahead and stop your share screen if you would.
Okay.
That'll get us everybody back.
Perfect.
There we go. And we make everybody give you the silent round of applause, if you would. We have some questions in the chat. Remind you, so we'll do sort of a moderated Q&A, and you can either literally raise your hand or use the little, probably on the reaction button, there's a raise hand thing. Either way works, or you can put a thing into the chat. But Mark, I actually have a question. Well, either one of you can answer.
Sure.
And I have a lead thing later on. I'll just give you a hint. It'll involve this little doohickey I have in my hand, and I'll explain why in a second.
Okay.
If it's not proprietary,
All right.
can you, in a good year, how many cylinders do you sell total?
Well, it's a combination between the steel and the aluminum. I will tell you
And there's an overall reason I'm asking the question.
No, in the overall years, it's usually about 80% aluminum, 20% steel. Because of the rise in cost of aluminum, that delta between the two prices is shrinking considerably. In other words, aluminum have gone up more from the recent inflation over the last year and a half or so than steel. I would say it's a lot closer than 80 to 20 now. And the numbers are a little bit proprietary, but I will tell you they're in the severals of tens of thousands.
Okay. And here's the reason I ask. So my father spent his entire career working for International Playtex.
Okay.
And his job was called the manager of planning, production, and controls. And what he had to do was figure out how many bras was Playtex going to sell in a year, how much material did you need to make that, how many hooks did you need, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
On a retail level, every year I had a formula I used at Reef Seekers that we would know how many of this, that, or the other we generally sold. And I had a certain amount. Usually we want to keep like 2 months supply on hand or something like that. So the reason I wondered in terms of that, in terms of cylinders, and it probably applies to other things, how do you project and plan for what you're going to need to keep in the warehouse? Because obviously, let's just pretend the number is 20,000 cylinders. You're not going to store 20,000 cylinders at one time in your warehouse. How do you go about planning and all that stuff? And I realize this has all changed with supply chain problems, but in just general terms, how do you plan that out?
It's a really good question. And if I was to answer that question from 2019 to prior, what I would tell you is when you have, that many years of history, you have a pretty good indication of the flow of the sales and the demand. And like, for example, it's no secret that we get busier in the summer. Okay. I mean, most of America with snow and ice, nobody wants to go buy scuba tanks and lead weights and go. There are an amazing amount of people that do that. I am always surprised at the sales that we do during winter, especially the places where I know I'm looking at the news in the morning and it's crazy cold and they're still buying tanks and lead. But normally, we're like, for example, with cylinders, because aluminum is built in the US, we can bring in shipments every month, for example. And so it's more steady. Whereas the steel cylinders are built in Italy. And so because of that, there's a lot more transportation time. You don't, you can't just get a few cylinders at a time. They come by the container load. And so, we have two facilities between Minnesota and California. So we are really trying to certainly do what your dad did and make our best guess as to, well, how many do you think you need? And then ship them. And guess what? We're never exactly right. It's we do the best we can. And, one of the things now, kind of applying that same logic to the last 2 years, one of the things I think has been happening in a lot of businesses, not certainly not just scuba, but I'll use that because that's what I'm familiar with, is what I consider to be plan B purchases. And what I mean by that is the customer they want, for example, regulator A. They want this regulator, but it's not available. And so they're willing to go, okay, well, I wanted that one, but I'm going to buy this one instead. And the dealer sells them that one. When that happens on a pretty repetitive scale, that messes up the forecasting for the purchasing people back at that company, because what they see is that regulator A, well, the sales aren't that big anymore. So we're going to buy less of those. But regulator B, the sales are growing. So let's buy more of those. And what they end up doing is creating a vicious cycle where you've got plenty of regulator B, but you don't have regulator A. And the dealers and the customers are frustrated because they can't ever seem to get regulator A into the store to buy the one that they wanted in the first place. And it can be very challenging, which is why we spend a lot of time as a team in communication, talking to each other about what we're seeing and what we're hearing, especially with dealers across the country, because we try to use that information in ways where we understand that what's actually happening, because a computer will just tell you the facts. They'll show you the numbers, but they don't really show you why the numbers are the numbers. And I find it's really important to try to get that information and understand, because we're seeing it, for example, where with snorkels this year, we literally ran out of snorkels early in the year. That never happens. We can forecast. We know how many snorkels we need. What that tells us is that other brands are running out of snorkels. So the dealers are buying up all of our snorkels instead, because we have snorkels. Whoever's got the cookies, everybody wants your cookies, right? And so what we have to now make a decision on and try to forecast is, will those dealers stick with our snorkels and keep buying them? Or when the other brand or brands get their snorkels again, will they go back to purchasing from them? And that, from a forecasting standpoint, that from a planning forecast, is one of our biggest challenges at, in this current environment, because you don't really know. You can ask dealers, but they don't necessarily know. They might have to meet certain requirements and buying levels to stick with that brand to keep their discounts or whatever. Or they may decide, I don't like them anymore. I'm frustrated with them. I really like your product. I'm going to stick with yours. And that may not be decided yet. So we're trying to hedge that they're coming back for more. So we try to keep the shelves stocked. If we're right, we're in a good place. If we're wrong, we pay our employees in snorkels. So that's kind
There
of,
you go. Absolutely.
everybody gets 5 snorkels.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. No paycheck this week, but boy, will you be snorkeling away. See,
It's really nice. People appreciate that.
all good. Elaine, I'll get to you in a second. We'll go to Andrea's question, which is on the chat. Well, and before we do that, though, what I thought we would do very quickly, I have to find this. This is a new feature on Zoom. Since we're here learning about stuff, I figure we can put us all sort of in a conference room and a lecture hall.
Oh my gosh! Now I feel like a professor.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Amazing. And it, there are.
Wait a minute, you lost me.
There
Where
we
am
go.
I?
You're around.
You're next
your
to me.
video's on.
Oh, there. Oh, I'm
You
not.
should be there. You
Hey,
should be there somewhere. There's it showed, this one's supposed to show 25. We got 22 people in the room, so I think it all fits. But anyhow, it was fun stuff. And if you wanted to put us in a tropical area, I can, put us. I guess it's not tropical with fake trees. So anyhow, but let's go to. I'll go back to the gallery view before I drive everybody crazy.
I didn't mind the classroom. It's kind of interesting.
It was sort of
Kind of cool.
Sort of cool.
It's
Just so
fun.
you all know, if you're hosting a
Fun.
Zoom session as the host, if you look up and view one of the options, if you got the updated version of Zoom, it'll say immersive, and that's where you find that. Anyhow, Andrea's question was basically, where are the products made? And I'll sort of put an addendum in there for Andrea that they're getting a lot of stuff from a lot of different places. So I don't know that there's necessarily one answer.
There really is not. It is something that we do publish, because for a lot of our customers, especially if they're selling into military or other contractual purchasers, they need to know that information. Some of the products come from the US. We certainly try to do as much as we can, as Vernon, really nicely showed you guys. We literally build our own weights. The tank boots we build where they're built in Nebraska. The stainless steel tank bands that we do for Highland are built in Minnesota. So there's a lot of different products that are built here in the US. Another large place where we build products is in Italy. That's where the steel cylinders come from. We do a lot of gauges from Italy, and we also do a lot of hoses from Italy. We used to build steel cylinders in Canada. That's no more, because Worthington closed that facility down in 2014. Another location where we talked earlier, we were joking because I know there's like a lady here tonight from Peru, that's in Peru. So we do business with Peru. Peru is a bit of a challenge right now with container availability. So we've never had this problem up until recently. So it's a new challenge to address. And then we do a fair amount of stuff in Southeast Asia. Predominantly that would include Taiwan, Thailand, which is where a lot of masks and snorkels for not only us, but where a lot of the scuba industry. There's a facility in Thailand that is beyond state of the art robotics. I mean, it's highly impressive. And so they are building a tremendous amount of mask snorkels and fins for the scuba industry there. We are just one of their clients. And some stuff that like bags, wetsuits come from China. So we do a decent amount in Southeast Asia, but we're kind of, like you said, Ken, spread around a lot of the global environment. So,
and to be clear, other than with Sea Pearls, which you guys own, these are manufacturing plants that in other words, these are not excess scuba owned manufacturing.
Correct. Yeah, we don't
you gotta
own
deal or
any
whatever.
of the facilities. What we do with many of the facilities is proprietary agreements. So they build to our design and specifications, and those are not to be, even though they might build for other clients, like for example, gear bags. Our gear bags are our gear bags, and their gear bags are their gear bags, and they do a very good job. I mean, I'm impressed with our team, that the relationships that they've built globally to protect our our brands and our products, but also just the relationships with the people, because they're just businesses like us, and many of the times we're working with the owners of those companies, and these relationships in some cases go back all the way to the very beginning. I mean, we are tied together for mutual success. If they build shoddy product, or they're late, or they have, they don't do well, it doesn't work. And sadly, we've had to discontinue certain relationships over the years because of things like that, and forge new ones. I mean, that's part of the challenges that we face. But we've been overall quite fortunate in that many of those relationships are quite good.
Cool. All right, Elaine, you are up.
Thank you. Well, it's not really a question. It's a compliment to Mark. I'm a businesswoman, and I've been involved in business all my life. And you to be complimented at your ability to take risks, because I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable, what you've been able to put together over the years. And you're truly to be complimented on that.
Of course,
Well,
if he was
I
really a
appreciate
risk
that.
taker, he'd own a dive shop. I'm just
Yes.
saying.
Obviously, I'm risk averse.
Yeah.
And then also I wanted to compliment Vernon on your diversification.
Well, thank you.
Really. I mean, that's, you can make weights, but I mean, you've got a lot of other things going on, which is great.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
All right. Well, now that Elaine has sucked up to Vernon, we got sort of a Vernon question there, a harder one from
right.
Andrea.
Thanks, Ken.
That's okay. That's all right. There's a little brown on your nose there, Elaine, but that's okay.
Elaine, keep it coming. All good.
Yeah, that was my favorite part of the night. So
That's right. That's right. Just bring it
right.
on. Andrea has another question, but it does relate, Vern, probably possibly to you with the sea pearls, which deals with lead poisoning and for the employees. How do you deal with that? As well as any lead waste, I would suppose you have too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. And thank you for asking that. So, I mean, I'll say first off that, we work very closely with the Minnesota Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and taking employee safety standards and implementing those and making them practice. Standard practice is very, very important to what we do. I will say that, like with lead, with what we were looking at, lead can become a problem if you ingest it. So if you get it, lead dust on your hands, you put your fingers in your mouth, you touch your nose, your ears, that kind of thing. And that's where it can really become a problem. Luckily, we don't deal with lead dust. But we still take all the precautions. So you will notice, like in those videos, the team, they obviously had their gloves on, their heated gloves, to protect them from the obvious, as they're building those lead weights there. But everything that you see there gets washed daily. So when they go home at the end of the day, they're washing their clothes on site. And wearing other clothes outside. You're not allowed to have food and stuff in the production facility, and then the facility gets cleaned up to Minnesota occupational safety health standards, and we keep it clean, in accordance with that. So it's luckily we're not dealing with the dust side of things with lead, but we do take precautions about when you're touching, and then obviously touching your faces and that sort of thing, to ensure that it's not being ingested, and then of course making sure that nothing that may have lead on it is leaving the building. So like when we wash and scrub our floors, all of that water gets accounted for. So if we put it into a scrubber that's going to clean the floors around those machines that we were looking at, that water then gets put into a barrel and then gets fed to a specific facility that will then clean that water before it goes out into the waste stream. And we account for all of those gallons. So it is, from kind of soup to nuts, something that we do take very seriously, and that the team there are all active participants in. And so, I like to think that we run a very safe operation. I don't know, Mark, if there's anything to add to that, but
no, the only a couple of things to that is just, it is good it's a great question, because everybody's, it's lead, and it's like, wow, I mean, if you guys make lead, isn't that dangerous? And surprisingly, what I've learned over the years is lead isn't as dangerous unless you do dumb stuff with it. Okay. I mean, meaning
Like scuba diving.
Yeah,
right. I mean, people work in dive stores and they touch lead weights, and they work with the rental belts. Look, if you're working in a store and you're working with the guy's belt, go wash your hands afterwards. The simplest thing with lead is to wash your hands after handling lead. That first and foremost is number one. But we do actually periodically even have blood draws on the die cast folks, just to make sure if there's a problem, we're aware and they're aware, so we can be dealt with. But we've not had incidences with problems. We only have a few people that work with the lead directly. The rest of our people are working in shipping, and they're working in other areas of production. And so, they know what they're doing on a daily basis, and it becomes routine. I mean, when the bell rings to go to lunch, first thing they do is they walk over and they wash up really good. We have a big basin and scrub brushes and stuff like that. So, and as Vernon said, with the cleaning and the washing of the work outfits and things like that. So we have been real fortunate that we don't have people doing dumb stuff. People, they realize they're working with the product that they need to be careful with. And it's been fine. I mean, it is funny because we get questions from time to time from consumers, stores, participants about lead in the pools, and what about lead in the lakes and things. And, there are those concerns. And really what we want people to just know is that it's the ingesting, as Vernon noted, that we want to avoid. So if we're handling lead, like in an environment where we're playing with weight belts and things like that, wash your hands.
So since we're on the theme of lead, I'll do my little thing here.
Oh, yes. I remember this was coming back. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we're a full service educational opportunity here. So
I'm switching.
You guys know what this is, right? This is pretty easy. It's a portable little luggage weight scale.
Oh, yeah.
I bring this with me on every dive trip now. Why would I do that? Because as they mentioned, especially on older lead weights, the weights may not be accurate. Yeah. What do you find on especially liveaboards at resorts? A lot of old weights. So what I do is I string together the weight belt, if I think it's got 20 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever I need, and then I take my luggage scale and I weigh the goddamn thing and decide it's over, under. And I know when we were on our Sea of Cortez trip, we were doing this, and we had one belt. I may not get the number right, but we had one person who was complaining. She said, well, I got 20 pounds on, man. I just feel like I'm overweighted. And I took the belt and it was like 25 pounds. And so we took off enough weight to balance it out. So just a thought on your trip, and you should, probably carry one anyhow to weigh your bags at the airport, take it to the resort or the boat, weigh your weight belt just in case. And that way you'll know how much you got. That's our little tip for the tip.
That's a great tip, Ken.
Yeah, that is.
Every now and then, it's like the blind squirrel that finds an acorn every now and then. I come up with a good one. Do we have any more questions that we'd like? Glenn's got a question. I can always rely on Glenn to have a question.
Good.
Unmute yourself, Glenn, and have at it.
Okay. Actually, a couple of questions.
Sure.
Are you guys mostly limited to distribution in the U.S.?
In terms of distribution, no. I mean, look, we're actually about the galaxy. So if there's diving on other planets, we're ready to go. Earth is a little bit limiting for what, my forecast here, but since I haven't found any diving anywhere else, we are certainly not limited to the US. All of our products, we do distribute all the way to all the places you can think of. One thing I always share that I find interesting is how much diving is in the Middle East. I mean, the number of cylinders that go to the Red Sea and through that whole area is quite interesting. There is a tremendous amount of diving in that area. But even from South Korea and all along the Asian coastline, all the way down South Pacific, Central America, South America, Australia, New Zealand, of course, Europe and UK through there. So no, our products are available worldwide. The one thing we don't do a lot of in terms of distribution globally, though, is lead. Because as you can imagine, if you are paying attention to what you're hearing about what containers cost these days to ship, they'll buy the crappy lead because it just costs half the price by the time you ship our lead to these places. We have tried to do deals with people, distributors in other, especially European countries, and find some success with that because they really do like the quality of the product that they get from us. But the cost is high, and once you finally get it there. So, and then cylinders, we don't do much distribution of cylinders into Europe because Europe requires a CE certification on that cylinder, and it's an additional $20 to do it. And there are cylinders that are built in the UK with it already, and there's one I think in Turkey, and they're using different thread specs on the valves in the neck of the cylinders. So cylinders don't really distribute well into Europe, but they do to a lot of other places globally that follow the DOT standards on US built cylinders. So, yeah, I mean, if we look at an area of growth that we're always trying to improve upon, it would certainly be in the international marketplace.
But then you would have to have sources, let's say within Europe or something like that, in order to distribute.
Right. So when we move products internationally, there's really kind of two different ways that it's done. One can be done through, a distributor in another country where that person buys it at really would be our lowest available pricing structure to then resell it to stores or charters, operations, resorts in that country or that surrounding area. But a lot of our business is done direct with not the consumer user, but the dealer or the resort. So we're working with them. And, because of the cylinders, most of those orders then are going by ocean, which is far more economical than by going air. So they'll buy, anywhere from 20 to 400 cylinders and then pile on the gear that goes with it. So it just kind of depends on the country and the relationship. But we don't warehouse our products as a point in other countries to then be resold. If it's being warehoused somewhere else, somebody else has already bought it from us. A little bit different than, for example, Vernon spent almost 20 years, 15 plus years with Aqualung. And so Aqualung has worldwide, distribution with their distributors and other wholly owned subsidiaries in other countries. It's a different format, bigger scale too than what we're doing. So maybe one day, but I kind of like it the way it is right now. Hey, look, with big company comes bigger problems. So
that is true.
And so as a follow-up, I suppose as the largest manufacturer and distributor of cylinders, you have a good grasp of where the industry is going in terms of, who's becoming a scuba diver, who's leaving scuba diving, I assume because of age and health issues and so on. Is that correct? Do you get a feel for that?
The sales of those cylinders, for example, or that doesn't necessarily indicate who is coming or going. Mm-hmm. It kind of gives us some indication where it might be growing or, decreasing. That I would agree with. There's a gentleman that spent, was one of what I consider to be the founding fathers in the scuba industry. His name is Bob Hollis. Ken will know who I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And, Bob would periodically over the years call us to ask about how, the cylinder and lead business was going. And what he really wanted to know is if we were busy, it was sort of like his crystal ball. If you guys are busy, then I need to ramp up production because that means sales are going to get busy. And if we're seeing things come down, he's going to slow down his production. And he was the founder of Oceanic, for example, and Aries and some other brands and things. I mean, quite a pioneer in scuba. But the point is he looked at that as a bellwether indicator of the health and success of where the industry is and may be going based on those sales. Because look, if people are buying tanks and weights, they're planning to go diving. They are intending to participate. And if those sales are softening, people are doing other things or holding back. So maybe that's a way to answer your question. But it doesn't really necessarily give us any indication as to who specifically, because we don't see who the end user is. The training agencies, your question would be a much better question for a training agency because they're collecting data points that we just don't have access to. When you fill out that C card, there's name, age, gender, location, all those things are a part of that C card. And so that I really believe your question would be better answered from a training agency standpoint, because I think they'd give a lot more valid feedback to that question if they're willing to share it.
Yeah. And Glenn, what I was actually thinking about, and Mark, you just touched on is, first of all, as an industry, we don't know who leaves.
Yeah.
Because we never see them. They just don't show up anymore. And my understanding and estimation has always been that and it's a couple things. Roughly, the number I've always used is roughly 20% of the people who get certified end up buying their own gear beyond mask, snorkel, fin, booties, gloves. The sport has certainly changed, and Mark, maybe this has affected you in sales too. In, let's say, the last 30 years, that when I first got certified in 1978, and looking around when a lot of you got certified many, many moons ago, a lot of us did this as this was a lifestyle, I'll say a commitment, that we were going to be scuba divers. And that's the big thing we were going to do. Well, now it's a bucket list checkoff. What do you want to do this weekend? Well, we could go mountain climbing. We could go to the movies. We could take a scuba. Yeah, we'll get certified. Okay. What do you want to do next weekend? So I think there's also been a no pun intended sea change in terms of what we expect, people to do. And then there's a whole, and as Mark said, it's more of a training agencies thing. As we have made training easier, more accessible, have we made so many more casual divers that they're simply not going to buy equipment, and then that affects the retail store, that affects the manufacturer, and everything else. So, I mean, it's a great question that it's almost the most difficult question as an industry that we ask, and we all talk about it.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Don't know.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that, Ken, is in terms of, I mentioned during the talk earlier that we speak to a lot of dealers around the country, and I shared Ken's point of, where people try scuba diving, they learn to scuba dive. And I really have found that, like, on the coastal areas, especially like, California and in Florida, people learn to dive. Okay. But as you move inland to other parts of the country, especially towards the Midwest, people don't learn to scuba dive. They become scuba divers. And it's a philosophical difference because they don't get into it just to try it. They want to do it, and they travel and they buy the gear. And so, in fact, I can remember many years ago talking to a dealer in Nebraska. He's like, you got to understand, I'm in Nebraska. I only have this many customers that walk into the store to learn about scuba. If I don't sell 80% of them scuba gear and get them to be a part of my club and travel with me and participate in the sport, I'm not going to survive. I don't have the luxury of just teaching them scuba and then waiting for the next group of people to come in, which a lot of stores do. They run specials and, hey, 2-for-1s and all these. Look, if you bring in cheap customers, they don't stick around. But when people are serious and they want to learn, heck, look how many dives everybody here has collectively been on. these are people, you want to find the people that want to stick with the sport. And I find in the more rural or more isolated parts of the country, the retention rate is significantly higher. That's not 100% true, but I find that trend to be true.
And the other thing to think about too, Glenn, from that standpoint, and Mark, I would assume this would affect the sales as well. If you get, let's say, 100 people to get certified here in California, and maybe we're going to go make some beach dives, we're going to do some local boat dives, so I'm going to buy my own tank, I'm going to buy my own weights. And now you have 100 people who get certified in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And they're going to go to Bonaire for a week, and they're going to go down to Mexico. And guess what? They could be as dedicated as the California guys, but they're never going to buy a tank, and they're never going to buy weights because they're not going to travel with those.
That's right. That's right.
So that gets factored in as well. So
that's especially true in the Colorado market.
Yeah.
We sell so few cylinders and lead into Colorado. It's almost a dead state in terms of that product category.
Well,
I've shown in the Aurora Reservoir.
Yeah, all right, we got one. Okay.
But Marlo and Audrey deal with a shop in Colorado Springs that has a very large. They have their own pool. They travel a lot, but
that's the shop I went to, and then I got somebody to take me over to
Marlo. Audrey, it's Underwater Connections, I think.
Yeah,
I got a T-shirt from them. Underwater Connections. That's
But my guess is they don't sell a lot of tanks. They don't sell a lot of weights. No. Colorado is that market is a market that is known for having a very good travel market, because
absolutely.
Who wants to spend the winter in Denver? Let's go somewhere where it's warm and we'll go diving. So
it's very true. So the cylinder sales are not always where they go indicative of how many people are actively diving or serious about diving. So you have to sort of remember that there's some caveats you have to know. Again, this is what I spoke to earlier. Data on a computer, in terms of looking at the data, doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. You have to dig in and peel back that onion layer a few times to really understand what you're looking at and why it's telling you that data.
Cool. Well, I think we're all learning good things tonight. And because of that, I'm putting us in a classroom setting now. As we wind
really
it up.
Like this.
Yeah. I love,
now you're the professor for sure.
Well, I am, because I'm down as the host. So what can
the fun thing
Vernon is the teacher's pet. Look at Vernon in the front row. Like,
well, Vernon's sucking up to the teacher. What can I tell you?
What can I say?
That's right. But we're not that we have to sign off, but I know these guys got to go to bed and go to work tomorrow at some point. So unless anyone has any pressing questions, again, I will ask you to give all the requisite Zoom seekers round of applause. It looks almost, see, it's interesting. Carol, tip your laptop down a little bit. I don't know how it works. A lot of you just got heads, because I'm not sure how the algorithm works on things. We've got a lot of Carol's a square.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of it just
sounds like she's from the 50s now.
Filters out the background. But anyhow, in all seriousness, Mark and Vernon, thank you very much.
Hey guys,
a lot of interesting stuff. Like I said, hopefully different perspective, and just give you some different things to think about in terms of how you deal with it from a manufacturer standpoint versus a retailer versus an individual diver. Sure. So next month, Zoom Seekers in June is going to be Nancy Caruso. She runs a nonprofit down in Orange County called Get Inspired. They deal a lot of times with kids, getting kids excited about the ocean. And she's also real big into abalone and kelp replanting. And I first met her when she was one of the aquarists at the Aquarium of the Pacific. So she will be with us next June. So once again, Mark and Vernon, we give you the thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time tonight and listening to us. And so thank you very much.
Good. Poor Laura in the back row. She looks like, where's Waldo? Laura, your head's barely above the, there you go. Barely above the desk there. There you go. Much better. Much better. Anyhow, guys and gals, thank you so very much for spending time with us at Zoom Seekers. I'll also put in a plug for this weekend. Don't forget, it's the Scuba Show in Long Beach, both Saturday and Sunday. Lots of manufacturers there, lots of seminars. I'm doing 11 o'clock Saturday, the world's largest fish in your face diving with whale sharks at Isla Mujeres, and Saturday afternoon with the coroner in the chamber we'll be doing our annual Why Divers Die panel, and I'll put in a plug Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. We have the Fish and Game guys are going to be presenting a seminar on the MPA decadal review process. I'm on one of those state committees about monitoring MPAs and what changes do we need to make them more responsive and better and blah, blah, blah. So lots of stuff going on at the Scuba Show this weekend. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys at the convention center. Again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Vernon. Thank you all for spending time with us, and we will see you in June.
All right, everybody. Dive safe.
Good night,
Be well.
everyone.